All right. Well, hi, everyone. My name is Brian Belva. I am a psychologist here in Louisville, and I'm so excited to be here today to be a part of the Langsford Lecture Series. Today, we're going to be talking about psychoeducational evaluations. And this first part is especially geared towards parents. And I'm excited to be here today to talk with parents about how to best prepare for psychoeducational evaluations and kind of what to expect if their child is going to be doing a psychoeducational evaluation, and hopefully maybe alleviating some fears about parents may have about what testing would entail. I mostly specialize in doing psychoeducational evaluations. The main three referrals would be for ADHD, as well as autism spectrum disorders and learning disorders. So, dyslexia would be one learning disorder, as well as dysgraphia and dyscalculia. But also do assessment for other areas like different emotional diagnoses like depression and anxiety and bipolar disorder as well. The first part we were going to talk about is kind of what is a psychoeducational evaluation. I think a lot of times when people say the word psychoeducational evaluation, typically they're referring to that there is an academic testing component to it. So we're looking at a child's reading and math or writing versus a psychological evaluation, may not entail that part. So that may be looking more at ADHD or autism or other factors that may not have that educational component, but they are both evaluations. So first of all, what is a psychological or psychoeducational evaluation? I know a lot of times when we think about it, we're wanting to look at what's going on with the child or what's going wrong with the child. But definitely a part of the evaluation is to look at the child's strengths. We don't want to just focus on, what's going wrong, but also what strengths are going on with the child. So, an evaluation, kind of looks at what the child's strengths are and how we can best utilize those strengths to help the child, and also what areas are, kind of more difficult for the child and how we can best tailor treatment options for the child to help them in those areas. These are some common questions that a psychological or psychoeducational evaluation can entail. I won't go through all of these, but these are common questions. So one of them may be, why if my child's grades declining? Why have they been declining lately? And obviously there could be multiple answers to that. Here at the Langsford Center, obviously, it could be that the child has a learning disorder like dyslexia that could be a cause in, their grades having difficulty, but it could also be because of ADHD or attention factors, or that they're having trouble with depression, or, there can be multiple factors, and obviously it's not always one or the other too. It could be, multiple things that are going on. So, these are some different questions that, why is my child struggling to make friends? What type of learner is my child? That kind of goes back to looking at what the child's strengths are and how we can capitalize on those strengths for that child in the education process. So I wanted to talk a bit about the components of a psychological evaluation or psychoeducational evaluation. Typically for evaluations, it would consist of 3 appointments. This isn't always the case, but I would say for most places, there would be 3 appointments that, if your child was evaluated, it would be 3 different meetings. And partly this is the case because of insurance. Us providers that take insurance, we're kind of bound by certain things where we would have to get like a authorization to do the testing from the insurance company, and then we would bring the child in for the testing and then do a follow-up to go over the results. At some places it could look a little bit different. So like at your bigger, I know being here in Louisville, like maybe at a center like Weisskopf or somewhere that's bigger, they may things may look a little differently. And then someone that takes private pay, may not be bound by some of those regulations where they may be able to do both the parent intake and the testing with the child in the same day. But I'm going to talk about kind of the most common method. So, the first appointment is an initial parent appointment. So typically it's just for myself or a psychologist to sit down with the parent and talk about what's going on and to be able to hear from the parent about concerns they're having for their child, and also for the psychologist to tell them a bit about the evaluation process and kind of what it entails. And then the second appointment is for the child to actually come into the office and do the testing in the office. I know there have been some push for kind of telehealth assessment, which is gaining some steam, but a lot of psychologists are still doing in-office testing just because it can, there's a lot of factors that you can observe in person that can be harder on telehealth. So, the first part, those appointments are in the office. And then the final appointment is to talk about, to go over with the parent kind of the evaluation. Typically there's a report in which the parent is given a copy of the report, and we go through the results and kind of talk with the parent about the findings from the report. So I'm going to talk in more detail about each of these three appointments in the next slides here. The first appointment, like I talked about, is a parent meeting, just for the parents to attend to talk with the psychologist. I know there have been a ton of, really bad things that have happened as part of COVID, and how it's changed a lot of the world. With luckily, some of the good. There's actually a good kind of part to it that the insurance companies have opened up a bit to letting us do telehealth. So we have, used to, we would only do it in the office with the parent, but now we have a bit more opportunities to build those appointments via telehealth. So, at least at the practice I'm at, the parent has the option if they want to come into the office for that initial visit, or if they want to do that on telehealth. And this has actually been helpful for, I've been able to see families in Elizabethtown or Frankfurt or even Bowling Green or farther out that, they're not having to come in for 3 times, and they can just come in, less times, and it's kind of opened up access for some families. Typically we only want to have the parent present for the initial meeting. Part of the reason is because, it could be hard for the parent to talk about concerns they're having with their child right in front of their child. If a child is having behavior issues, that may not be the best thing to talk about that right in front of the child. So we do like to have that first meeting just be with the parent, so that they can discuss their concerns freely, and there's not any awkward situations where a child is hearing things about them that may make them embarrassed or may be difficult for them to hear. I do typically, if it's like a 16 or a 17-year-old, I typically will give them the option to be present with the child, just because they're kind of getting older and kind of starting to enter adulthood, and if they would like to be a part of that initial meeting, definitely am open to them being a part of that meeting. And then obviously if I'm working with an 18-year-old, they are an adult and they are the ones to meet with me, 18 and older, and they, a lot of times will want their parent to be a part of that meeting, but they would give consent for their parent to be a part for that. We do sometimes have some tricky situations. The most common one would be if we have divorced parents. So, if we have parents that are divorced, typically we want consent from both parents, just because, on a lot of the court documents, if there is, it's written out that both parents have medical decision-making rights, that we would need consent from both parents to do the evaluation. And we also make it very clear that we're not testing for parental fitness. So sometimes we can get pulled in, or by a lawyer that they want us to use our report in order to comment on, child custody type situations. And we try to make it very clear that this evaluation is for the child and to look at their cognitive abilities or their academic abilities or, other factors like that, and not looking at parental fitness. So, kind of talking about that, talking about what does that first appointment look like. So, typically we will have, I'll have the parent come in or on Zoom, and I know from the initial paperwork who referred that child for testing. There's not always a referral, and a parent doesn't have to have a referral for testing for insurance purposes, but a lot of times it is, maybe a pediatrician or a school learning coordinator, which I know some of you may be in the audience now, that are, kind of recommending an evaluation. So I'll open up and say, I saw that, so-and-so referred your child for testing. Could you tell me a bit about your child and kind of what's going on with your child? And I like to kind of keep it open-ended because I know, sometimes parents may be waiting 2 or 3 or months to get in and talk with me. And, a lot of parents are looking forward to appointment and have a lot that they want to share. So that's typically the style that I'll do to kind of let the parent talk about their concerns. But I kind of play it by ear. I know some parents may be a little nervous about coming in, and in that case, I will kind of jump into doing more structured questions. And definitely I have, information that I want to know in this initial appointment as well. So I'll, kind of go through more structured questions, which I'll be talking about on the next slide. I want to talk a bit about, kind of after the parent has had a chance to kind of talk about what all their concerns about the child, then we kind of explain the testing process, kind of like what I did in the previous slide, as well as kind of insurance information about the testing and make sure that they understand kind of the process of those factors. Definitely, when talking about the evaluation, I kind of mentioned, what all questions do I ask as part of the evaluation? So these are some different factors or different areas that I would ask about. So after giving the parent time to talk, then I would jump in and start asking more structured questions. And a lot of times the parent has already given me this information when I've kind of let them talk at the beginning. And I may be filling in holes of stuff that I haven't already gotten from the parent in that initial meeting. But I do want to know about family history. I want to know, who all lives with the child. Is, siblings? Is there other, parents in the household or other adults that live in the household with them? I want to know about any family history of any mental health concerns. Obviously, if a child has a immediate family member that has dyslexia, we want to know that. We want to know that, or has a ADHD or other factors. That's something that we take note of. With birth history or with medical history, we want to know about their birth history. Were they full term, or was the child early or premature? We want to know about any major medical diagnoses or any surgeries or hospitalizations. We definitely want to know if the child has had a concussion, which I'm sure you all know could, when a concussion could cause a factor in some of the testing that we do. We want to know if the child is on any medications or was in the past. We want to know about their vision and hearing abilities. And we also want to know about, their pediatrician, or if they're working with a psychiatrist, and who the name of that provider is, because we, after we do the evaluation, we're able to collaborate with them. For developmental history, we're asking about speech and motor milestones. So, kind of when did the child first start speaking and walking? Have they been in any speech, occupational, or physical therapy? For younger kiddos, we're asking about toileting concerns. Are there any toileting concerns? We ask about sleep and appetite. And then, kind of looking at some of the social factors. We also look at, how the child does with same-age peers, their friendship-making skills, kind of how they do with social cues. We ask about the strengths of the child, what are the child's strengths and what are areas, that the parent sees as things that the child enjoys doing. And then we ask about emotional factors too. So, under the emotional factors would be asking about, were any concerns about has the child, made negative comments about themselves, or any concerns about them being withdrawn? We'll ask about, any self-injurious behavior the child has exhibited, or if the child has made any suicidal comments. We definitely ask about, anxiety symptoms that the parent may be seeing, and has the child been in any counseling before? Are all questions, as well as has any abuse occurred? We want to know about those things, because definitely any of that can impact, if a child is experiencing emotional symptoms, can impact their academic performance or their focusing abilities. And for academic history, we also want to know about, what school is the child at? Does the child have an IEP or a 504 plan? How does the child do academically? Is there certain areas, subject areas that are harder for the child, or strengths of subject areas for the child? And then we want to know about previous testing history as well. So has the child, received a previous evaluation before? And a lot of times we want to have a copy of that evaluation. There have been times where, a parent is wanting a second opinion, and they're wanting me to look at a child and not necessarily review the results of a previous evaluation. And I will honor that, but typically we do like to see, previous testing. And part of that is just because some of the tests we give, like some of the IQ test or academic batteries, they have certain practice effects with them. So if we don't want to re-give a test too soon, and make sure we use a different version, or make sure we have the testing battery best fit for the child. So that was kind of more detail about that first appointment. So I want to talk a bit more about the second appointment now as well. So for that second appointment, typically when the parent and the child, get into the office, we'll bring the child and parent back into my office, and we typically will play a little game together and have fun together. If a child is probably 10 or under, we'll play a board game and kind of have the child warm up. I think that this is really important to establish a little bit of rapport instead of just jumping in and immediately having the child do a math problem or something, kind of getting the child warmed up and comfortable being in the office. Some children can be really scared about coming in. They may think that, they may compare it to like going to see their pediatrician or something where, I've had children that are really scared, am I going to get a shot? And so they, definitely kind of helping the child realize, that this appointment looks different than like more of a medical appointment, and kind of helping the child feel comfortable. We'll talk about, typically how I word that to the child is I'll say, do you kind of know what's going on today, or why you're here? And a lot of times I use the word activities. I'll say we're going to be doing some activities today, where some of these activities are going to be like puzzles or games. Some of them will be kind of asking you questions about how you're feeling. We'll be doing a little bit that looks like school, but I promise that's not all of it, just a part of it. And I like that word activities, because I think when you use the word testing, it kind of can make the child, they might think standardized testing, or they might, it kind of can have a negative connotation to it. I used to use games a lot, but then I realized, a lot of kids, doing, math problems and reading stories, those aren't games to a child. And I want to be honest with them, that it's, some of them may be like games. Some of the IQ test, components have puzzles that can be really fun for games and other activities. But I think that word activities is the best word to use. And I do have a prize box for kids. So for a younger kid, they work towards a prize that they can earn at the end of the day, to get them excited about being there. I've used stickers, or where a child can earn coins, and once they do so much with me, they can pick out their prize. So we try to make it exciting for them, and make it the most fun day that we can for them. If the child is comfortable after we talk for a bit, then I will have the parent go to the waiting room while the child does the testing in the office with me. That's not always the case. Sometimes the child may still be really anxious even after we've had the discussion, and may have trouble separating from their parent. So I am, okay with the parent staying in the office for a bit, until the child gets warmed up. And I've even had situations where the parent would stay in the office the whole time. Typically that's not preferred though, partly because for one, I found that, the child typically does better with the parent in the waiting room. They, perform better. And I know for parents, it may sometimes be hard to not coach their child a little bit. Oh, my kid knows that, or kind of coaching their child, which is really good intentions, but it can be hard for a parent. And so a lot of times we do prefer that the parent, is able to go into the waiting room and have the child in the office. Once the parent, has went out to the waiting room and the child is in the office with me, or if the parent stays in the office for a little bit for the child to warm up, typically we'll do about 45 minutes to 60 minutes of stuff with the child. So some of the, which I'll be talking more about what's on this slide and some of the measures. So I'll do some of that and then we'll take breaks throughout the day. So, after 45 minutes, we'll play a game with the child or let the child pick a board game, or I have Legos in my office or a foosball table, or, a lot of times I'll have the child tell the parent that the child can bring stuff with them for the evaluation. So if they want to bring, I know children love electronics and, games and iPad games and stuff. So if that's something they want to do during their break, to kind of do a little bit of work with me and then take a break. So we split up the day and kind of into smaller blocks to kind of best make it, kind of best for the child. Obviously with a younger child, so, I see kids as young as 2, but, for a kid that's maybe, 4 or 5, we may take a break every 30 minutes. But for, a teenager, they may not even want a break. So we kind of, we'll modify it for the age of the child or what the child needs. A lot of times I also will have the parent bring snacks or drinks in. So if the child wants to have that while they're here, typically we start the evaluations at 9 and then go till about 12:30. So, we can kind of push through and then they can have lunch after they're done. But definitely we've had children that want to bring lunch with them that day, which is perfectly fine. For the evaluation, these are common components that can consist of an evaluation. So, but I want to make it clear that we may not always do all of these boxes. We probably will always do this final box, which I know, a lot of the school professionals, kind of familiar with some of the teacher questionnaires that we will send out to teachers. But, we do, sometimes cognitive assessment, academic assessment. This is related to kind of focusing and attention assessment, emotional-based measures. This is kind of related to social or autism assessment. And then, like I mentioned, the parent and teacher questionnaires. But sometimes, I'll have a parent that comes in and says, my child is doing really well in school. They're making, really good grades, but I'm concerned about, how they're forming friendships and their ability to focus. So in that case, we may not do this box and we would do, some of these other areas instead. So we definitely can tailor the assessment to best fit, the, kind of what the parent is looking at for the assessment. And definitely that makes factors too with insurance. So we kind of talked earlier about insurance, but when we bill insurance, we're billing how many units of testing we're doing. So, without getting into too deep of detail, these different boxes have different unit amounts. So if we do, if we don't do a certain box, that would lower the amount of units and may possibly make, the testing more affordable for the parent. So definitely we make modifications to this process. Now I wanted to talk a bit about the third appointment as well. So for, we talked about that second appointment. For the third appointment, it is to go over the results of the evaluation. And it can, again, either be in person or via telehealth. So we can, we've done a lot more telehealth recently. If it's in person with the parent, I'll have a hard copy of the report that the parent can look at to go over what the results are from the evaluation. And then if it's telehealth, a lot of times I'll ask the parent if they can meet on a computer screen, because then I could put that report onto their screen and they can look at it with me as we meet on telehealth, and that tends to work well. And then the parent would get a copy of that report after the call was over. Typically I want the parent to wait to have the report until we meet for that third appointment. So I don't like to just give it out to the parent before we have a chance to meet and go over the results. And partly that's just because it can be a little bit confusing, and we can walk through what all's in there and can kind of explain the results of it, and instead of just handing it to them and letting them look through it. There are times when I have a parent that may feel kind of anxious about it and they would like to look at it beforehand before we meet, and I will honor that. But typically we do like for them to be able to view that document with me, and that we can go through what all's in there and kind of explain everything to them. This is kind of a common kind of layout of a report. So when I say report, we will have a written document that is given to the parent after we're done with the testing, that kind of goes over what all testing we did and the results of the testing, as well as if any diagnoses apply and recommendations. And so, we will have a copy of that report. For that, a lot of times when I go over these reports with parents, I'm not doing as much talking about the background information, but kind of jumping right to that testing and results section. So we go through each test that we give and kind of what the test was measuring and what the results of the test are, and kind of explain each test to them. And then talk about, if there is a diagnosis, kind of why, the rationale for why that diagnosis was given, and kind of going back to this testing results as to why we gave that diagnosis. And then we go over recommendations. Common recommendations could be that, the report is shared with the school to kind of have them best tailor a treatment plan for the child, academically, or with, if it is the case for ADHD, to set up the school environment the best for the child. A lot of times these reports are going to the pediatrician to kind of help them best to work with the child. And, obviously we never want to push medication, but that can be discussed as an option. If that's something the parent would like to try, that they can speak with their pediatrician about medication options if they do apply, and obviously also counseling. So if we think counseling would be beneficial, we can talk about what type of counseling would be helpful, and I'm always happy to help parents find a good fit for a counselor for their child that accepts their insurance, or someone that lives close to where they live that they could work with for the child. And then there's other recommendations too. Maybe a child needs speech therapy or occupational therapy or physical therapy, or other factors that we can talk about. And then even places like here, like at the Langsford Center, the child that could benefit from services, tutoring services, or other kind of educational services outside of the school setting. I wanted to talk a little bit about, as well about, let's see, kind of different factors to consider as part of the testing. So, the kind of how to best help the child prepare for the testing. So like I said earlier, I avoid using the word testing, even though I keep saying it just now. Kind of oftentimes we'll refer to it as activities, to kind of make the child feel a little bit more comfortable about coming in. So, as a parent, I think that it would be great, if your child is about to go through an evaluation, to be able to word it as, this is going to be looking at, doing different activities and looking at different areas, seeing how you're feeling, solving some different puzzles and completing different activities that feel a little bit like school. And then again, that they're not getting shot, or they're not, this isn't like going to be like going in to see a pediatrician. I think it's also great to work with the school, if you know ahead of time that, the child is going to miss that day, to talk with the teacher about, that the child will be missing, that day and to kind of best prep so that, because that can be stressful for some children to have to miss a day of school, and to make it, where that things could be set up if they have certain work that they need to do because they're going to be missing that day. And then lastly, I think it is very important to have the children well rested and well fed, as well as hydrated. I've had kids that came in for the assessment and they just had a sleepover the night before, and that probably is not the best idea because they're exhausted, and we want to see their best performance that day, and don't want to see if they're really tired or maybe they didn't eat breakfast that morning and then they get really hungry, that could impact their performance, and we don't want those factors to impact their performance, and want to see kind of their best functioning on that day. Awesome. Well, I know we have several people on Zoom, so if you would like to, if anyone has a question that they would like to ask me, they're welcome to turn on, if everyone could turn on their microphone, and if anyone does have a question, I'm happy to field any questions. Awesome. Well, I enjoyed being with you all today, and like I said, this is my contact email, so feel free to email me if you have questions about testing. I'd be happy to speak with anyone, or if you have anything further about what I talked about today, that you have more questions or want more information, I'd be happy to speak with anyone. So, all right. Well, thank you very much.